peeled, shredded, diced. Those are a few words that best describe being below 8% body fat, an extremely low body fat percentage, which very few people will ever reach over the course of their entire lives. And rightfully so. Being under 8% body fat, for anyone that's not a competitive bodybuilder, there isn't really much of a point as far as an aesthetic standpoint goes. Most people who want to get a movie star or superhero-esque type of a physique or level of leanness are looking at getting somewhere probably closer to 10 to 15% body fat, depending on their current amount of muscle and genetic structure. Getting below 8% body fat starts getting you into the territory of getting closer and closer to having zero visible body fat. To be frank, it's kind of a crazy look, especially for us natural lifters. In fact, it might most commonly be thought of as an alien-like look, rather than one that might be considered attractive, at least from the traditional sense. Right now, at the time of recording this, and especially at the time that this video has gone live, I'm getting extremely close to the start of my natural bodybuilding competition season. I've been dieting for well over 10 months at this point, and I'm getting very close to that 5 to 6% body fat percent range. It's a cool place to be. Again, not necessarily attractive per se, but cool. It's alien-like. I'll pop up some photos from my 2023 competition prep where I was around the same body fat percentage, so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. I'm saving sharing my current prep photos for after my season has already kicked off and started, so hopefully you don't mind me sharing these older ones instead. In this video, while showing you footage from my latest full body gym workout, I thought I would share with you exactly what it's like being below 8% body fat and aiming to get even leaner than that. If you've never been there before, you might have heard it said that being super lean is not all that fun. And I'll tell you, although it is a special place to be, the myth is more or less true. It's not a ton of fun. In sharing this with you, my hope is that for those of you who have been wondering about the topic, wondering what it's like to get below 8% body fat, that you'll find this interesting and informative. And for the natural bodybuilders out there who are watching right now, who are either in the process of prepping to get this lean as we speak, or who have done so in the past, my hope is that you'll find some relatability from this. Before we get started, if you find this video to be helpful or interesting, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out. Okay, let's dive in. As a preface to describing what sub 8% body fat feels like, I want to start by saying that first, I'll be sharing based on my own personal experience, being deep into my 5th natural bodybuilding prep. I'm not going to go deep into the science, but speak mostly based on my own anecdote, and perhaps that of several of my bodybuilder friends. And second, I'm not going to be describing or teaching best practices to get below 8% body fat. That might be a topic for another video. Third, being below 8% body fat actually poses some health risks, especially when attained through suboptimal means. So my best advice would truthfully be to not do it unless you have someone wise and experienced helping you or coaching you through the process. And lastly, for almost everyone, being below 8% body fat is something I wouldn't recommend unless you are competing as a bodybuilder or are just kind of crazy enough to see what that level of leanness looks like on your frame. Okay, now that that's all out of the way, let's start with the first, let's call it symptom of being sub 8% body fat. And it's the obvious one. Yep, you're going to be physically hungry. Now, from my experience, the ideal would be to structure your eating routine so that each of your meals is very satiating. I'm talking about including lots of fruits and vegetables, including adequate protein, and including predominantly other satiating whole foods to keep you feeling as full as possible without causing excess bloating and discomfort. Of course, the further you get away from that ideal, the more unnecessary and extreme hunger you will probably experience. So, in my opinion, it's important to have an understanding on how to make your meals maximally satiating to avoid any potential unnecessary discomfort. But even upon eating satiating meals, simply from being extremely lean, you'll still feel varying degrees of hunger between meals. Sometimes an ongoing background of low-level hunger, and at times some more high-level hunger where you feel your stomach really start to eat itself, which isn't the most fun feeling in the world. Right now, I'm at the point of feeling both of those types of hunger and have for many weeks and even months by this point. It's common for me to not feel fully satisfied after finishing a full meal either, even immediately after eating. Not exactly fun, but that's part of the trade-off to getting shredded. A special kind of food focus, which I would say is even a bit different than physical hunger, can also be expected when being below 8% body fat. This is where your mind starts to drift into thinking about food at times when you otherwise wouldn't be thinking about it at all. Yes, that might mean thinking about all of your cravings, but even other things outside of your regular cravings too. Me, for example, I'll catch myself thinking about and even creatively concocting strange meal ideas in my head whenever my mind starts drifting. Honestly, food focus kind of sucks. It's one thing to be physically hungry, but thinking about food on an ongoing basis is not super desirable, especially when you're intentionally limiting your intake of it. For that reason, I make a point of looking up zero, and I mean zero, food social media channels or profiles or anything of the sort to avoid making the food focus worse. And I don't watch any shows that revolve around food either, like Somebody Feed Phil. I love that show, but I'll wait until after my prep is over to catch up on those episodes. The next symptom of being sub 8% body fat is being less strong than being at a higher body fat percentage. Yeah, being peeled looks cool, but it's definitely not the time to start signing up for strongman competitions. While it is possible to uphold a good amount of strength with good training programming and recovery, having more fat in your frame or stored energy, along with more energy in the form of food entering into your body, would probably lead to more potential strength. Not to mention, being ultra lean means literally having different leverages when you're lifting. Your range of motion changes, the way you fit into machines changes, your perceived levels of energy changes, and all of those changes usually aren't in favor of strength output, but against it. I've actually been able to hang on to a good amount of strength myself at this point in my prep, but even so, I was still significantly stronger before starting my prep and even at the earlier stages of it. This segues me into the next symptom, which is that the body becomes less forgiving to the demand of strength training. Simply put, lifting weights hard involves putting stress on the body, on the muscles, on the joints, on the connective tissue, and shoot, on the mind too. Since being super lean means having less stored energy to use for recovery, and it also means taking in less energy and nutrients from food, it means there is less supply to fuel the demand of hard training. In other words, the body has less resources to use to recover from hard training. Training hard is important at sub 8% body fat to encourage the body to hang on to all of its muscle. But I found that there's a fine line between making sure you train hard and being mindful of how much hard training is done so that you don't overextend. The next symptom is a decrease of physical and eventually mental energy. Now, from my experience, exactly how lean, as in 8, 7, 6, or 5% body fat, someone experiences this, it might vary. But speaking for myself, I felt my physical energy levels diminishing for months now, depending on the time of day, probably since first hitting right around 8% or even a percent or two above that. At this point I'm at now, not going to lie, my energy is much lower on average compared to when I started. And I'm much more sensitive to the days where my food is a bit higher or on my refeed days. Feeling the effects of being at maintenance calories with a predominantly higher carbohydrate intake rather than being in a deficit, I feel that much more significantly. Around those days, my physical energy is noticeably higher. As for my mental energy, it definitely flounders at times, and in combination with having low physical energy, it can leave me feeling like I'm in what I like to call sleepwalker mode. But interestingly, there are times where I can uphold extremely high levels of concentration, where I can get my work tasks done, for example, at a high level in a very timely manner. There are, however, big ups and downs with that. The next symptom is experiencing poorer sleep. This is, for me, probably the hardest part of being super lean, and is something that impacts virtually everything else the body and mind feels and experiences. Hunger, energy, irritability, strength, recovery capacity, you name it. Poor sleep negatively impacts all of that. Honestly, I think sleep probably directly impacts things more than being in a deficit itself. Anyhow, for me, getting super lean means not being able to stay asleep for as long. For example, I often go to bed at 10 p.m. and wake up at 4 a.m. wide awake. That said, on my refeed days, I will often stay asleep for an hour or two longer after taking in the extra caloric intake. Those refeed days are a blessing, no doubt about that. The one nice part about being super lean, at least from my experience, is that falling asleep is seldom an issue. If anything, I find that after a certain point in the evening, it's actually tough to keep my eyes open, much more so than if I had more fat in my frame. The real struggle is the staying asleep part for me. The next symptom is a potential increase to irritability levels. Yeah, being hungrier, more food focused, less energetic, and having poor sleep usually comes with some irritability in the mix. I've learned a lot about this one over the preps I've done over the years and definitely handle it significantly better now than I did during my first few. My own personal opinion on this is that one of the greatest opportunities of getting super lean or doing something like a prep is to learn how to control thyself, or in this case, learning to control your irritability. I am, for example, not a slave of my emotions or impulses, so although I feel irritable, that's not an excuse to act it out. Instead, I get to practice using my will to control my emotions. Yeah, being irritable sucks, but it is cool being able to practice controlling it. The next symptom, and the final one I'm going to mention in this video, goes in alignment with the one that came prior. Being super lean can amplify negative emotion, feelings of anxiety, depression, fear, all of those super fun emotions that we all want to be feeling. Said no one ever. For me, as someone who has a disposition to fall into some pretty intense anxious feelings, find myself feeling some of the worst anxiety when I'm deep into prep and getting very lean. Yeah, this one's definitely tough. I get set off quite easily from things that are really not worth reasonably worrying about. But here's my 2 cents on this. Although negative emotions are very, very tough to coexist with, experiencing them in an amplified state is also, like I mentioned with irritability, what I think is an opportunity to learn to control those emotions, to overcome them. I'll be honest. This prep has left me with some periods of insanely high anxiety, but I've got through all of them and learned from them. Mainly that nothing that left me initially feeling anxious or fearful was even close to being as catastrophic as I had worried it would be or had envisioned it would be. Not even close, or at all even. So I'm truly learning and experiencing just how irrational my anxious bouts are or can be. And that's actually been leaving me feeling more resilient to it overall, really. And I think that learning this resilience is something that has been something special that has come through getting super lean as I progress into this prep. And there you have it. The effects or symptoms of being below 8% body fat. At this point, I'd love to know your feedback. Were any of those symptoms surprising to you? Have you experienced any of them before yourself if you've been below 8% body fat? Let me know your insights, comments, and questions in the comment section below. Before this video comes to a close, I want to quickly let you know about the work that I do. When I'm not making YouTube videos or Instagram content, I work full-time as an online physique coach, where I help my clients to accomplish their muscle growth and fat loss goals by optimizing their approach to strength training and nutrition. And I coach them through the process. I've been doing this work for over 7 years and love helping my clients to not only transform their bodies, but ultimately their lives. If you've been considering getting some help with accomplishing your own physique goals, feel free to hit the link in the description below, where you can learn a little bit more about the work that I do and how I can help you. You can even use that link to schedule a free video consultation with me. If you have any questions about my coaching or how I can help you, just email me at sam@jadeathletics.ca. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.